Hey, welcome to A Conversation With. My name is Philip DeFranco, and today we have the fantastic Troy Hunt. Hello, sir.
G'day, how are you, Phil?
I'm good. Thank you for making the time. It's what, 7:30 your time? AM?
Yeah. Like we are well into our day. We're very morning people in this part of the world.
Why is that?
Partly because we don't have daylight saving in this state, because apparently it confuses the cows. So we don't have daylight saving here, which means we're often an hour behind somewhere like Sydney or Melbourne anyway. So it's like, all right, well, we'll just make up for that. We'll get up earlier. And then have you seen how nice it is here? Like, we want to be up in the morning enjoying it.
I've only seen pictures. I've been wanting to go out there for a long time. Promised that we would do a live show. Actually, with COVID coming down here, I finally got an offer to do something at some colleges out there. But I've never been on a plane that long, so I just got to get over that. And I'm at that point where I'm just ready to go anywhere. And so if I could go somewhere like where people want me and it's beautiful, yes. 1,000% yes.
I mean, even the plane, like people say that, and all right, I've done it a bunch, so maybe I don't think about it as much, but
Sure.
It's like you get on, you have a meal, you watch some movies, you have a little sleep, and you get up and you're on the other side of the world. Like it's not okay, it's a hard problem at the moment, but it's normally not a hard problem.
You know what? Yes, I will say the number one thing that I've realized over the last, I would say 7 years, and that's because when I started having kids, is any trip without my children is a vacation. It does not matter if it's work. I love my children, but trying to wrangle I think I'm thinking like 18 hours on a flight trying to wrangle a child, but they're not coming. They will see Australia at a different time in their life.
Yeah, and also like kids are great on flights because they've got a screen. Like they sit there and they watch the screen and there's people bringing them food.
Once they hit a certain age, boom. Great.
For me, it was like, it was about 3 years old. Like once I got to 3 years old, and so long as they can control the little buttons to watch whatever they want, I'm fine. Like a little bit older, they take themselves to the toilet and everything. You're sitting there just having a glass of wine. It's just a chilled out experience.
Yeah, I think I'm just permanently scarred from, it was one of the last trips I took before the pandemic hit us. It was a flight from, I want to say it was Hawaii to California. Not anything too rough, but I was flying. No, I'm sorry. It was Florida to California, and it wasn't anything too bad. But we both, my wife and I, had the flu. It hit us in the middle of the night, and the 3-year-old did not care about a screen, and so we had to keep playing this game with this car. Which is not a fun thing, and then trying not to excuse my language, shit ourselves. But anyway, Troy, we're completely sidetracked. Why are we talking about it? You're a web security expert. You're the creator of Have I Been Pwned? I feel like I got to use you for all the fucking expertise I can get. I got to milk this knowledge out of your head. That's the worst way I could have said it. There we go.
That's not weird at all.
So, Troy, I'm gonna, instead of opening up soft, I'm gonna go straight to fear mongering. That's because I'm a member of the media now. That's what we're supposed to do. Just scare everyone into watching our show. What is the single biggest threat to the everyday person out there as far as cybersecurity?
Shitty passwords, like without a doubt. It's always shitty passwords. And I know that that's not sort of as scary and dramatic as the media would like to have you believe. But honestly, like that is the problem. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. So there are lists floating around with literally billions of email address and password next to each other. And it's all the sorts of passwords you can imagine people use. And people these hackers take these billions of lists, or billions of email addresses in a list, and then and there's all automated, right? But they'll go to a website and they'll go, okay, let's try this one. Let's try Troy's email address, any shitty password, and we'll see and the website's got nothing to do with the website stuff came from, but because people reuse their passwords everywhere, a bunch of them work. So this is the thing, like this is the gift for hackers that just keeps on giving over and over again.
Yeah, I feel like every year I always see that, like, it's usually on a bunch of sites with the Mashable article, and it's like, here are the top 10 used passwords, and it's always about 7 of the same, and then an alteration.
Yeah, because it's easy, right? It works. And I think there's a really interesting human element to all of this, which is that there's all the technical security stuff, and that's great. But at the end of the day, like, people have got to use it, and people will always, it's like water running downhill, right? Like, they're going to find the path of least resistance. All they want to do is like log on to that website and, buy the t-shirt or watch the movie or whatever. And there's this thing in the way, which is the password. And they're like, how do I get past this thing as fast as I can? I got that good old faithful one. I'm going to use that. And you're straight through. So it is a very, very predictable set of behaviors.
All right. So just that. Yeah, I would say I every now and then I'll have something that I think is low security, like my Netflix login. And I'll have to go through and be like, oh, I've been using this on for several years. And I'll realize I got hacked because the subtitles would be like populating in Portuguese, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's time to change.
So, you mentioned that. I'm doing this search now. If you go to Twitter and you just search for Netflix hacked, and you read through the list of things people are saying, and it's always like, someone has put my Netflix into another language. And the funny thing is here, all right, it's funny for us, not so funny for them. But the funny thing is that it's constantly people saying hacked, as though there's some sort of super sophisticated thing.
Sure.
But every one of these tweets is implicitly saying, I've got a shit password and I use it all over the place. And that's what's actually happened here.
Yeah, I mean, that word is kind of lost a lot of meaning, yeah?
Well, it gets used to mean fundamentally different things. I mean, it's fundamentally different to have, let's say Netflix has a real serious security vulnerability and someone's actually getting data that they shouldn't. This gets used in the same breath as someone's like literally using password 1234 with an exclamation mark on the end and getting into accounts. And I just don't like the way that it gets used so interchangeably, because it sort of shifts blame, right? So it shifts blame from the decision to make a really, really poor password choice back to the provider. But then there's the question of, well, should Netflix actually let people use those passwords, and should they be resilient to when people do reuse passwords?
What do you think the answer is?
I think it's both. I think it's a shared responsibility. So I've got to be a bit careful. You know what it's like on the internet where everyone's got an opinion. And if I say something like, these people should start reusing their passwords, without fail, someone pops up and says, well, you can't say that because you're victim blaming. So, whoa, hang on a second. This normally means something very different to the context you just used it in.
Right.
And I understand what you're saying, but the reality of it is that we all get to make a choice about our security posture. And if you choose to use a password that's weak and reused, then you take on this risk. If you choose to use a password manager, for example, and generate some crazy big long random one, well, then you get to benefit from that. And what I think we need to look at is we go, look, this is a shared responsibility. So you as an individual user, you get to make your decisions, and then the website operators, they got to make some decisions about security, but it doesn't all just like sit on one person or organization's shoulders.
So I mean, what are the three things you would say a person could do to like protect themselves the most effectively, right? Like the most broad, non-specific sort of thing.
I'm going to lead with something different to what I normally lead with, which is just to make it more interesting. So I'm going to say, making a conscious decision about how much information you want to share. So we keep saying, for example, time and time again, it'd be like, there's an incident with Facebook. Believe it or not, someone's data on Facebook has been used in ways that it shouldn't have been used. That's going to sound like victim blaming again. But anyway, I'm going to do it regardless.
I don't think. I don't think what you're talking like what you're talking about isn't like isn't the akin to what was she wearing, right? This is a completely different world, and I think what you're talking about makes sense. Like, we need to be vigilant. That's like, it's different.
But, sort of to continue that thought, I think with the Facebook thing, like if we all just thought a little bit more about how much information do we actually want to share? Because we have no guarantees that the organization that we share it with is going to protect it in the fashion that we would expect. And the Facebook thing's perfect. And whether it was the whole Cambridge Analytica drama a few years ago, or whether it's simply people putting the wrong privacy setting on a post, if you only share information which you would be happy for everyone to see anyway, well, then suddenly things start to change. And, that's not to say that you shouldn't use Facebook for personal reasons, but I think the point here is that you get to decide how much you share. And maybe the question you should be asking yourself is, how much do you want to put at risk by sharing on a social media platform?
And do you? That's the thing, though, is I wonder, as we like it feels like the past 10 years things have vastly changed. Whether it be the difference between people saying they care about security versus what they actually are more comfortable with. Because even for me, I've kind of gotten to this place of, I will be as safe as I can possibly be, but I manage my life and I handle myself and I do things with the expectation that whatever was private will be public. Like that the most damaging, I live my life in a way where the most damaging thing that could come from someone gaining access is like they gain access to my money, right? Which is obviously horrible, but in my field would like, arguably that's like the less risky thing compared to like the shitty secrets that get exposed for other people because they live like double lives. You know what I mean? So I very much live from this standpoint of like, I'm on too many sites. I will do things like if I'm purchasing from a site that I'm unfamiliar with, or even a lot of the times these days, sites that I'm familiar with, if it's a non-subscription, using like destructible cards, right? Cards that I get to just like one time and then it blows up, whether it be like a cred.ai or another service like that. But I don't know. I feel like people these days say they care about security more than they really do.
I think that is true up until the point where something goes wrong. And in my experience, what often happens is people are like, oh, yeah, it's important. And they take all these shortcuts, but they don't really care too much about it. And then they get money stolen, or they get their email exposed, or something else bad happens. And then they're like, I will do anything at this moment to make this go away. It's like, well, it's too late, mate. It's already happened. Yeah. And it's the same with organizations that have data breaches. It's like, we take your security seriously. Every single data breach notice begins with, we take your security seriously. By the way, we lost your data, but we take it seriously anyway. And every organization in advance is like, yeah, this is really important to us, but how much do they actually do? And then it happens, and then suddenly their data ends up on my website or something like that, and they're like, we will do anything to make this problem go away. It's like, well, all you can really do now is decide how you communicate about it. You know, you can't get the genie back in the bottle.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually kind of interested in, I feel like you guys, or you popped up in the news recently for several reasons, but one was because of a breach. And then did you change your opinion on including phone numbers as far as like a searchable database?
For Facebook. So Have I Been Pwned started in 2013, and it's always just had email addresses. And look, I mean, just about every data breach has an email address on each record, because you think about, signing up to websites, you've got to provide your email address. So it's always a good key, if you like, to search your personal information by. And the other thing about email addresses is that they adhere to a pattern. There's always some text, and then there's an @ symbol, and then some text, and there's a dot, and then there's some more text. Every single time, here's that pattern. So it's very easy just to write code to extract that from a set of data. So it's easy to get email addresses out, and it's easy to search by them. And then the Facebook situation, which wasn't a breach, Facebook information where they exposed too much data, people scraped it, turned it into a great big list, that didn't have email addresses. It was like 0.5% of the records had email addresses, but everyone had a phone number. So now we've got a different key to search by. So that was when I sort of went, all right, well, look, this kind of makes sense. We've got the phone numbers. They're here in a very nicely formatted CSV file. So we just extract those, drop them into the database, and people can search by that. So that was the reason I changed my view on that. But I honestly don't think I'll be doing a lot of phone numbers, because if there's email addresses, well, then you still have the key to answer the question, have I been pwned? Yeah,
I was wondering why it was such a big thing, and because the only site that I can think of that I'm like, okay, that's safe to see if I've been hit is yours. And I mean, was part of the reason because these other places did that and you just wanted people to feel safe?
Well, yeah, that was part of it, because I was seeing a lot of other stuff pop up where, and it's funny because I'm sure people probably looked at Have I Been Pwned like this once upon a time, but it's like, there's a site that's just popped up and it says, come and enter your personal information here and we'll look for something, and then, like, trust us, it'll be fine. And I'm like, maybe not so much. So that was part of it as well. I wanted to ensure that Have I Been Pwned remained like an authoritative source that people could trust. And to do that, I had to have the data in there they could search by.
And then I want to say that I saw another headline. Did you do something with the Minneapolis police recently?
Yeah, kind of. So this,
not working with them, but
there was some commentary on it. So this would have been about a year. I got in trouble for that as well. I always get in trouble with these things. Not from the police. I got in trouble from the Twitter armies. This was after a bunch of riots over racial injustice. It was because it was the George Floyd situation, which would have been about a year ago, wouldn't it? And Anonymous. So, like there's this group called Anonymous, right? Yeah. You hear them on the internet, like, no one knows what they are, and anyone can be anonymous. And then the only way you know someone's anonymous is they say, we're anonymous. That's it. So Anonymous, I'm air quoting, popped up, and it's like, okay, whilst there is all this outrage, here is all the email addresses and passwords of the Minneapolis Police Department. Now, this was at a time where people really wanted to throw the Minneapolis Police Department under the bus, and there was a lot of outrage, and I get that sentiment, and people were attracted to this story because this story sort of fed this anger and this rage within people. For me, I'm always curious when I see something like that, though, because what I'm interested in is this legitimate? Is it real? There is a story and a narrative and everything, and that's a very important thing, but there's this other thing, which is, where did this actually come from? And when I was looking at it, it's like, this just doesn't really add up. You're not going to have, in all likelihood, all of this data sitting there in one place, because it was things like you would see the same email address multiple times, but with different passwords. It's like, well, if it's come out of one system, it's going to be one password.
Right.
And anyway, so as I started delving into it, I found enough evidence to conclude that this wasn't a breach of a police department service. This was literally what I spoke about before. People going through to previous data breaches, finding whatever the domain name in Minneapolis Police Department was, and saying, let's just grab their email addresses. Because cops have online accounts just like everybody else. So let's just grab every email address from Minneapolis cop and then the password next to it, and then we'll bundle that together and we will say this is a hack of the Minneapolis Police Department. So that was it. And the reason I got in trouble is some people weren't happy that I demonstrated that it was fake.
Oh, because okay.
I just wanted the truth. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, what drives you for stuff like that? Is that you feel like full transparency, or is it actually doing the groundwork? Like what excites you to do stuff like that?
I think a lot of it's curiosity. I think for a lot of people in this industry, it's curiosity. So I find it fascinating when someone sends me a data breach, and this is now like this lens into the internal workings of an organization that never wanted this information to be public. So I find it really interesting to sort of go through and go, okay, was this real? Where did it come from? How are they storing their passwords? What information do they capture from people? So I find that very fascinating. And then just so many times individuals aren't notified by organizations when there is a data breach. And now I have this ability via Have I Been Pwned, which has got a little counter on my desk. There's about 3.8 million people subscribed to that. So every time I get a data breach, I go, okay, which of the 3.8 million people are in there? They'll get an email. And then things like yesterday, I loaded a data breach called Park Mobile. So this is to do parking with your phone. 21 million people or something in there. And there's all these people who got notifications from me. I think I sent 160,000 emails or something. And they're popping up on Twitter going, hey, thanks so much for this. We never got told ourselves. So,
Yeah.
That's sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I'm glad that you found out. And it drives me to see people get value and use out of it like that.
Well, yeah, because I mean, I think it's am I correct in saying like it's the only reason everyone hasn't been impacted is because there's just not enough bandwidth to utilize all the stuff that's been hacked?
I think in one way or another, just about everyone has been impacted. And the only question then is, how many of these incidents do we know about? Because it's the whole sort of, Donald Rumsfeld unknown unknowns kind of thing. It's like, how many services out there that have been breached and the operator of the service doesn't know it? So the customers definitely don't know it. I don't know it because I haven't seen the data. What I do know is it happens frequently enough that I end up being the one to tell the company, hey, by the way, you've been breached. Here's all your data. So I find it fascinating as well that we see what must just be like the little tip of the iceberg in Have I Been Pwned, that 11.5 billion records or something that's in there. And it's just this little tip, and there's this massive unknown underneath it.
So whenever you contact companies like that, do they ever get aggressive, or is it a thank you, or is it more just like they don't respond?
Yes, it's a bit of everything. It's there's a broad range, and I guess what's a little bit different now compared to some years ago is the service is really well known, and very often the company's heard about it already or they've used it before, so they're like, oh, I know this thing. I've got some fancy titles now which help a little bit and make me seem more mature. And if anyone's sort of in doubt, I just go, look, just like go to Google and search it. I've got a Wikipedia page. It's got stuff on there. I've literally been to Congress and testified. I got dressed up and everything like I was really there. I'm a legitimate person, and I'm not shaking you down for money or anything like that. But, we do get all sorts of ranges. I think the thing that's probably the most annoying with many recent engagements like this, and when I say engagements, like I don't make money out of companies doing this. It's just like literally your data's out there. The hardest thing recently is lawyers. Like lawyers And it's not lawyers having a go at me. It's lawyers trying to craft the message about the incident. Lawyers trying to water it down, to downplay it, to not be transparent. Lawyers trying to do everything they possibly can to cover their own ass and not actually get the information out there. So that's probably what upsets me the most, actually.
Yeah. Well, I mean, because a big aspect of your job is really, in part, it's education, but a lot of it is like accountability, right? I mean, how many times have we heard a story about a breach where it's like, and it happened 2 years ago? You're just like, what? Yeah. And you knew about it a year ago?
And to be clear, like there are organizations out there that have done a sensational job of handling data breaches. And one of the things I try and do is like spend time literally talking to them and going, look, let's craft the messaging this way. Let's involve these people from the media because they're proper InfoSec journalists, and that'll get your narrative forward. It won't just leave this vacuum where everyone speculates and just throws you under the proverbial bus. And there are organizations that have done a fantastic job of that. But then there's ones at the other end of the spectrum, and there's kind of like everything in between as well.
Where would you put the Equifax breach? Where would you put that one? I
know it's the FTC put it.
I love that just like it's a company that can still exist. Like that's I don't know.
I think what's interesting about Equifax, I mean, there's many interesting things about Equifax, but going back to the point about lawyers. So this was obviously like lawyers pulling all the shots, which you kind of expect to have happen there. But Equifax, their entire business model is to have all of this data about all of these people, including me, because Equifax owns the credit bureau that we use down here in Australia now as well. They have all this data without we'd use the word informed consent, without me going, yes, like if I go to a website and I sign up because I want to buy that T-shirt or something, that's my informed consent. It's like, yes, I'm going to put my data in there to buy a T-shirt. You don't have to do anything. And Equifax has your data, and they have it legally, and they operate. I don't think with impunity is the right word, but they're able to operate in this way with just huge swathes of data from people who have no idea what they have, and then sell it to people. That just feels like a super shitty business model. And like I get the value proposition of credit bureaus, but it feels shady.
Yeah, I mean, I have negative feelings towards the whole credit industry in general because it just feels so predatory to put you underwater from the get-go. But I did want to ask, like, because I correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that you said that jumping into this space was a bit of an accident because your background is initially web development and like working on apps, right?
Yeah. So I guess I still am because I built all I have I've been paying. I was a developer, and I spent 14 years working for Pfizer. Now, of course, everyone knows who Pfizer is now because they're in the news about the vaccine and everything.
In everybody's bodies. Yeah.
Up until last year, I always had to say, you know what Viagra is? It's like, yeah, we make Viagra. It's like, this is literally what Pfizer was known for. So I spent 14 years there building software and then running architecture, which is basically telling other people to build software. and I just saw so much egregiously bad software, particularly from stuff that we outsourced to really, really cheap vendors in low-cost markets. And I was just like time and time again going, all right, let's see how crap this is. Look, I've broken in. I've got all the data already. And I just started getting really, really interested in the mechanics of how these things are put together, how you break it, and then particularly the education piece. So, all right, stop doing that. Like, here's why. Here is how it goes wrong. Here is how you break this. Now, here's what to do to make sure that doesn't happen. So that was sort of my pivot from just purely building stuff to, I guess, seeing it from the other side as well.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I just want to take a second to thank one of the fantastic sponsors of today's episode of A Conversation With, Ritual. You know, sometimes even when we're trying to eat healthy, we might not be getting all the key nutrients that we need from our diet alone, and that's where Ritual comes in. Personally, I've been using Ritual's Essential for Men 18 Plus multivitamin that helps support heart health, brain health, normal muscle, and immune function with key nutrients like vitamin K2, omega-3 DHA, vitamins A and D3, as well as magnesium and zinc. Ritual helps support foundational health with clean, traceable ingredients that make it easy to turn your healthy habits into a ritual, hence the name, I think. Their subscription-based supplements are easy to start and easy to snooze and are delivered directly to your door for only about $1 a day. It's vegan-friendly, non-GMO, gluten and allergen-free, and you can track where each nutrient comes from right down to the supplier. And right now, Ritual is offering 10% off during your first 3 months. So what are you waiting for? Just go to ritual.com/ACW10 and use code ACW10 to get 10% off. Do it. Help support your heart health and normal muscle and immune system function today. So yeah, go check it out. But with that said, back to the podcast. Something I wanted to go back to, just because I I don't know if I want to eventually be in a place where it makes sense that I have to do it, or it's the scariest thing in the world when you actually went to Congress to speak.
Yeah.
What did it leave you feeling as far as American politics? You can compare it to Australian politics, but just what was the experience?
So one of the realizations I've had as I've spent more time with governments and law enforcement in particular is that everyone has this impression, and our views, I guess, are shaped by our experiences, and a lot of our experiences of things like government are based on what we see on TV and what we see on the news. And time again, I go and meet with law enforcement or government or these sort of entities that we have this picture of, and it just resets my view. And my view after coming away from Congress was that everyone was super, super nice. So the folks you see on TV, the congressmen, the congresswomen, the mouthpieces, they were lovely. And they were so appreciative that I had come all the way from here. Talk about long flights. Getting from here to DC, it's 2 long flights. So they were really, really appreciative of that. And then the other thing that I really realized is that when people are critical about, say, a politician not understanding something they think they should, like the nuances of creating a password or something, what they got to remember is that everyone that was there on the TV, grilling me over the data breach stuff, they will go from a hearing about cybersecurity, and then they'll go next door and they'll have a hearing on the opioid epidemic or something like that. And it will be a completely different topic that I know nothing about. And they have to be across all of these things. So the way they do that is they have very smart staffers. So there are staffers behind the mouthpiece that deeply understand the topic. And the people that I spoke to around the data breach stuff, they were absolute top-notch, very, very smart people. And really, really nice people too, like the kind of people you want to go and have a beer with or a nice chat over lunch, which I did, and it was very enjoyable. And then you got to kind of figure out, all right, well, how do I communicate with, let's say, someone of my parents' generation who's going between all of these hearings, they've got to go do the opioid thing next. How do I communicate cybersecurity to them in a way that they can understand, but also so that they can take stuff back to their staffers that are actually actionable? So where is that sweet spot between consumability at a broad level and actually having something that you can action?
Yeah, I mean that's the problem forever, but that's the problem of our age, especially on every platform. How do you communicate these things, especially those heavier things like we talk about when we're covering news and relaying information, it's like, okay, we got to get all the facts, and it's like, yeah, but how do we do it in a way where any of it fucking sticks? Because
and that's the challenge. It's not just our industry; it's all sorts of industries, I guess. But that was one of the things that really sort of stuck with me after I left.
Yeah, I could see that. Regarding educating oneself on this, I don't know if you've spoken about this, but do you feel like this sort of field should be something that's introduced in school, and if so, at like what age?
I think technology in general, and this is, I guess, a bit of an offshoot of that. And I think to some extent, every school kid gets technology from the get-go. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by some extent, you see little babies like holding iPhones, right? So they get to start interacting with machines and learning about these things at a very young age. My kids are, my daughter's about to turn 9 and my son is 11. So they're still in junior school, as you'd call it, primary school over here. And they have some degree of technology in their curriculum. But I tell you what, if they spend as much time doing technology as they do learning other languages and music, I would be very, very happy. So I feel that there's not the right balance, to my view, given that technology is the thing that they're most likely to later on go and work in, plus it literally rules every part of our lives. So I would really love to see kids doing more coding. And there are loads and loads of cool coding things. It's not always just like writing code in a text editor. It could be everything from, dragging and dropping blocks, because then you learn about process flow. I got my kids a really, really awesome puzzle for Christmas called Turing Tumble. And Turing Tumble is like a big board with marbles that fall down it. And you have to put all of these little switches here to make them fall in different ways. And they call it the marble-powered computer. And it's just fantastic for shaping minds around thinking about problems and how to solve them. So I'd love to see more of that creep in a lot earlier, but I just think it's such a critical part of a kid's education.
I gotta, after we do the podcast, I'm gonna ask for that, because I've introduced my oldest to, I think it's called Coding Obby, and it's essentially like you do this, then that happens, and it like gamifies like very, very basic coding. And I'm just like, if there is a field that my son, my one of my boys goes into, I want it to be, and it's so stupid because I'm as someone that's like entertainer commentary, I think so poorly of myself because if like I'm like, what do I provide society if my internet went off? Nothing. And so I'm like, I want my kids to like look into being an engineer or like a coder or just something that could actually have skill. But actually, so I'm gonna ask you to co-parent with me because I have a 3 and just turned 7-year-old. When it comes to allowing them on a computer, whether it be for security or privacy reasons, what do you allow the kids to do?
It's a really good question, and I think the first thing on this is to say that it is a very personal thing. And what I mean by that is we think about kids online, right? Like I am comfortable putting photos of my kids online. Now, I'm selective about that. It might be I'm playing tennis with my son. We put a picture there, or on holidays or on a beach or something. And there are people out there, there are parents who are like, there shall never be a photo of my child on the internet until they are old enough to consent because it's their choice. And I'm sort of going, shit, imagine if you let kids make all their own choices. It's like all they'd be doing is like eating chocolate all day and not doing anything. So we as parents have to make some decisions. So there's a degree of that, but I think what is probably more important than what they see or what they're exposed to is how it happens. So I really like the idea of them using tech in spaces where we can see them. So if they're sitting down on the couch and they're using the iPad, my son's 11, like he's going to see porn. Like this is the reality of being online.
Oh no,
he's not going to go seeking it out when we're sitting down there with him. That would just be very weird. But there's a lot of other things which are a lot grayer, right? Like he's going to see, horrific stories on the news or things like that. He's going to have engagements with other kids in terms of social connections. And I think experiencing that with parents who don't need to be technical, but if they have enough social awareness to sort of guide the kids through that really makes a really, really big difference. Now, I think you take that, and then you take the parental controls that are built into devices. We've got all Apple things, right? So in terms of mobile devices, there are parental controls, screen time limits, which apps they can use, which connections they can make. And then I guess the other thing there as well, I mean, so many social media platforms you can't literally sign up to until you're 13 anyway. And incidentally, don't lie on that shit. And the reason not to lie on that shit, I've got a good friend who's got a couple of daughters, and they're now adults. But because one of them created an account when she was like, 10 years old or something on Twitter, and then years and years and years later, she put in her correct birth date, they just went, nah, turn it off. So you lied years ago. Like we're literally deleting all your tweet history. So, look, it's personal. Be present.
I think that's good. Yeah, right now, I'm only at the stage of my son loves Roblox. So and he asked for Robux for the first time, and I was like, okay, you're gonna get $10 at a time. Let's say $10 a month. You're gonna do all these things, and it's actually been like a useful tool in the sense of one, because he's not able to like play with his friends in person right now. That's been a lifesaver over the last year, but also it just gives us something to do, which is great.
Well, I think there's also lots of cool like techie projects that are close enough to sort of building code and this sort of thing that it gets kids more interested. So we've been doing a lot of IoT at home. So his room looks like a nightclub. There is so much neon in his room because we've just been buying like LED strips and IoT connected bulbs. And then we use an IoT platform called Home Assistant, which is super, super popular, open source. And then you write your own code for things like scenes. So we'll literally sit there and go, okay, mate, so when you wake up in the morning, what do you want your room to look like? Like what color do you want that light? And do you want this thing on? Let's now write the code to do this. And then he gets to just ask his Amazon Alexa, and he goes, hey, Alexa, make Ari's room cool. And all these lights and things change. And it's just good fun, right?
Do you feel like you're going to push your daughter more to be in your field than your son, just because I know that you've said that there's like a lack of diversification in your field?
Yeah, it's I think it's a question of where they show aptitude. So that fortunately they both show interest and aptitude in this. What I find a bit interesting with my daughter as well, it's like, okay, it's a very predominantly male industry, but she goes to a girls' school and my son goes to a boys' It's a long story behind this, so I'm still not sure if it was a good idea or not. But regardless, so she's not surrounded by peers that set an expectation about whether this is a boys thing or a girls thing, because everyone is a girl.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really curious to see as she grows up, like how are her views of technology shaped differently to, say, other kids her age that are in co-ed. So look, with both of them, it's just giving them as much opportunity as possible. And I don't feel compelled to artificially push her harder because of her gender. I push them both hard anyway, as hard as I can get away with. But I think there's a little bit of me which is like, I would like to try harder to get in front of the girls at the school and go, hey, look, this industry is awesome, because they probably haven't had as much exposure to that as what the boys would have. So maybe as she gets older and we can start talking about careers and things like that, there might be a bit more push.
Why do you think that is, that it might not be in front of girls or women as much growing up?
I think it's just the stereotypes.
Yeah.
We stereotype. Let's say we'd stereotype nursing more with girls, and we'd stereotype, technology or something more with boys. I think there are probably other industries where, at least to my perception, it's probably pretty even if it's like law or medicine or something like that.
Sure.
But there is that stereotype, and I think as we're just sort of all becoming a lot more conscious of it in recent years. And the challenge now, of course, is how do we get better equality without overly pushing people in a direction that they don't want to go, but recognizing that things have to change as well. Like, it's a really, really hard problem. And I'm always cautious about it when I talk online as well, because we've just established how upset people get on Twitter about absolutely everything. And particularly in a topic like this gets really emotionally charged. But I think it's got to be a combination of doing better with the industry as it stands now. And then there's always the pipeline discussion. It's like, well, we need more girls coming through so that they get it. And then people go, yes, but you've got to make this a place that they want to be so that they get into the pipeline. And you sort of get into this cycle, which I think is just going to take a long time to get more equilibrium in.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what kind of shifts we see, even if it's 5, 10, 20% change is a massive thing, but over like the next 20, 30 years. And I do wonder, it feels like maybe it's just like a quick moment, but it feels like those steps are being made, whether it be in industries you like. It's obviously different, but oh my gosh, I'm going to have it. But like the gaming industry, I feel like there have been a number of big high profile stories over the last 4 years. And so I don't know, it will be interesting, partially out of progress and partially out of old dinosaurs getting scared.
Look, I hope both my kids go into this industry, because I think it's just a fascinating place to be. And I think this is where the opportunity is. And I also think it's just cool. It's like, it is just so much fun doing, whether it's the security stuff or the IoT stuff. We've been doing a lot of 3D printing lately as well. This is just cool, and kids should be doing it, full stop.
Okay, so I was going to say, when you mentioned 3D printing, is it something that you can actually like do and use and love? Because every time I get like excited about it, I end up talking myself out of it, because I'm like, I know me, I'm just going to make a few like action figures and not do any of the cool shit that I see popping up on my TikTok.
So the caveat is, I'm yet to create anything of any use whatsoever.
Okay.
I have made
You're the perfect person to ask. Yeah.
Nothing useful. But the reason I decided to do it eventually is over Christmas, I spent a bit of time with a childhood friend, and he had a 3D printer, and look, we drank a lot of beer, and it seemed like a really good idea at the time, but he's walking me through it, and I'm like, this is super, super cool, the stuff you can print. You know what you're doing. Just show me what to buy, and I'll order that, which I did. And what I've learned since is that it is without doubt the best educational tool for tech that I have ever bought the kids, because the kids see these things like growing out of the heat bed there. And then they want to build stuff. So to build stuff, you've got to go into some sort of a CAD program, and you've got to understand about the 3 different axes. You've got to understand about the layers that get built, and you've got to understand dimensions and things like that. And we bought like a little set of vernier calipers. So if they want to build something for real life, they can measure it precisely. And then they've got to understand how to slice it and how to drag it into, we use a little open source product called Octoprint. So drag it into the browser and send it to the printer. And then I've set it up between their rooms, and they keep coming out the whole time. They're like looking at the printer and, how's it going? It's sitting there at 200 something degrees Celsius, so there's some danger involved, and I think they probably enjoy that too. But no, look, it has been fascinating for the kids. Best money I've ever spent for them.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying the podcast. I just want to take another quick second to thank one of the sponsors of today's show, Skillshare. No matter what 2021 brings, you can spend it creating something meaningful with Skillshare's online classes. Because Skillshare is an online learning community with millions of members and thousands of classes. Take a class, connect with others, or even teach a class of your own. A premium membership gets you unlimited access to high-quality classes on topics such as music production, photography, and even how to increase productivity. I know that I've said it probably 1,000 times by now, but my all-time favorite on Skillshare has got to be Gary Vaynerchuk's Context is Key, social media strategy in a noisy online world. But also, I gotta tell you that a new class just launched. It's called Social Media Success, Make Videos People Care About. It's actually taught by Lily Singh, a small creator that you might know of. Doesn't have a late night show or anything now. And if those don't interest you, there's also a ton to learn from. They have courses on everything from understanding and investing in crypto to the art of ceramics, web design, graphic design, learning an instrument, and more. Skillshare really does have it all. So if you want to explore your creativity head on over to Skillshare.com/DeFranco and get a free trial of a Skillshare premium membership. That's Skillshare.com/DeFranco. So yeah, check it out. Enjoy. You're welcome. Thank you. And now back to the podcast. Troy, with governments and lawmakers, do you feel like, I know that you talked about they have these groups of people around them. They're very, very smart. But what do you think is the area that you've noticed politicians are maybe the most lacking or least receptive?
I think it's probably understanding the broader privacy implications of the decisions that we're making today. So everything from, we touched on Equifax, everything for the ability for Equifax to actually exist and have the data they have, through to the impact of things like social media platforms. And I think the challenge that lawmakers really have at the moment is trying to find that balance in there. I like Facebook. People spin out now they've said this, but I am one of the 3 billion people that actually use Facebook. And I like it because I like being able to communicate with my family in other places, and particularly at the moment, right? Like we can't see people as much. I like that. But I feel uncomfortable with the amount of information that they have and the reasons why they have it. And the challenge for lawmakers is to try and figure out, how do we give people this thing that they like and that does provide value to society, but at the same time not have people's personal information just monetized for corporate gain? That is a very, very hard problem. I don't think there's a clear answer for that.
Is anyone doing it right? With GDPR, is that the road that everyone should go down, or what do you think?
Well, I think once we start getting into regulations, what I find really fascinating is, we have had governments and laws for, let's call it thousands of years, right? And we would balkanize the world. So it'd be like, all right, there's America, there's a bit, and then there's, Mexico and Canada, and just pick something in that part of the world. And everyone's got different borders, different laws. I mean, geez, you've got so many different laws just between states over there.
Right.
We do too, we just got less states. So you kind of geographically break the world down. And then that worked fine until we all got on the internet. And now suddenly you get everybody congregating together with none of the borders, which is so amazingly wonderful in so many ways, including being able to do stuff like this. Mm-hmm. But then which laws do you use? And then stuff gets super, super, super murky. So coming back to the GDPR piece, I love the principle of people being in control of their data and informed consent and all this sort of stuff. But how does that work with, let's say, Australia? We'll pick an easy one and then we'll get on China. So how does that work with Australia, right? Folks in Europe will go, well, GDPR has got extraterritoriality clauses. So the GDPR laws apply to people in Australia. Like if you run a service in Australia, you've got a European data subject in there, you got to adhere to their laws. So how are you going to do that? Right? And this is literally what's coming up, where there'll be a data breach and European people will pop up and go, I am mad because this American company had a data breach. I am going to exercise my European rights here and I'm going to get my data protection authority to go to town on them. And I keep seeing these responses come back from regulators, which is like, they're in California. We can't do anything about it. Because short of it being like Facebook, where you've got points of presence and you've got leverage all over the world, it's just very, very hard to do. And then, let's get to the China piece. Imagine China popped up and said, we've got laws about the way we think our citizens' data should be handled. We have a Chinese citizen who has an account on your service. You've got to follow our laws. By the way, we have a very different view of privacy to you. How does that stick? I would love to see, and maybe this is more like a human rights thing, right? Like, I would love to see a baseline where across the globe we just go, look, there's some basic shit we're not going to do with people's accounts. Basics. We're not going to send them spam if they sign up to a service. We've got to have the informed consent, this sort of thing. I'd love to be able to get that baseline across the world, because we are so out of sync, even between places that, for all intents and purposes, are very, very similar, like, say, Western Europe and Australia. There's just fundamentally different provisions around things like privacy at the moment.
When it comes to China, do you feel like the fear and threat involved with cybersecurity and the Chinese government, it's where it should be? It's not where it should be. It's more fear mongering. Because I mean, we obviously I would talk deeper about like TikTok was like the story 8 months ago, and like it was how China was attacking us. But what are your thoughts when it comes to that?
So I used to spend a bit of time in China back when I was working at Pfizer, and it was really interesting to talk to people there. So I think the last time I was in China would have been 2014. And I don't think, certainly with regards to privacy, I don't think a lot has changed in that time. But the first thing I think is really important is that we have perceptions of what goes on in China the same way as they have perceptions of what goes on in the US and Australia and everywhere else. Our media very often paints China in a negative light. Their media very often does the same to us. So I'm just really conscious that, first of all, like I touched on earlier, like we're all shaped by our own experiences, right? Mm-hmm. And the experiences we have are very biased towards our view of the world. Now, that said, when you do get to the privacy thing, there is just a fundamental cultural difference to privacy, and it prevails all the way through into things like the services we build. So a good example was in Pfizer. I remember we were building services to communicate with sales reps. And China was a big emerging market for a company like Pfizer. And the folks in China really wanted the communication to go through WeChat. So people love WeChat in China. It is like, think of how much most people love Facebook or social media platforms here, and just dial it all the way up. Imagine that every time you wanted to organize an event, it was Facebook. Every time you wanted to do your banking, it was Facebook.
Right.
And they wanted to do all their communication with sales reps through WeChat. And we're sort of sitting here having this discussion. It's like, well, Chinese state is going to be able to see everything that goes in there. But everyone is totally cool with that as well. Like, everyone on the ground is totally cool with that. You'd say to people, it's like, do you really want to do like everything through WeChat, and then the government can literally see everything you're doing? And they're like, yeah, sure. Why not? So there is a very different cultural tolerance there. And this is what I think makes it especially interesting when we get people with very different tolerances like that, and they're all online together using, for the most part, the same internet, except China does tend to have its like Chinese version of everything. But they're just, even if we take the internet out, just very, very different views of how much privacy people should have in a place like China compared to somewhere like the US or Australia.
So you think it's primarily a culture? I mean, when it comes to, do you feel like the Chinese government has shown examples of being predatory in nature from a cybersecurity standpoint?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I mean, we know that corporate espionage is a big state-sponsored thing. There's no doubt at all about that. Now, I also don't doubt that the same thing has happened in the other direction over time. But I think culturally, their views to things like intellectual property are very different. You just walk around in Beijing and you work that out very, very quickly. So there's definitely a difference in culture as well, but I'm sure that happens a lot more from the Chinese side than it does the other way.
When you say you walk around and you see that very quickly, do you mean just that normally copyrighted things are just all over the place, or?
Exactly, yeah. And look, I believe that is something that they have been clamping down on, because, of course, they get a lot of international pressure. And now that China's got this sort of strongly emerging middle class, and I remember particularly Shanghai, even back in 2014, the number of really high-end retail shops you'd see around the place. And this emerging middle class wants to have this fancy stuff. So I would imagine that does put pressure on the bootleg stuff in terms of the government obviously wants to have these stores. They want to, I guess, westernize, for want of a better term. So, yeah, but that was always the impression I got. It was like, look how out in the open this stuff still is. Right. I mean, if you did that, even at a market in Australia, you'd be shut down so quickly and you have the copyright book thrown at you.
Well, shit, because I'm trying to think. What was the little, not scooter. Oh, my God. It was supposed to be like the biggest piece of technology. Everyone has like a little scooter now. Oh, my God. 1 second.
Oh, like the hoverboards.
No, not the hoverboards. Oh, but kind of like the hoverboards. But
the ones you stand on, though.
Yeah, what was the first one?
mental blank now.
Oh no! I'm gonna Google the first hoverboard, and then we're gonna act like I just fucking got it off the top of my head. First hoverboard. Oh no, it's not there. They call them the Swagtrons now, which is it's the self-balancing scooter. What is it?
The ones that
Segway.
kept blowing
Thank
up.
you. Yes. No, I mean it's kind of like with Segway. Segway was it was a little bit of a dud because I feel like it ended up getting coming in like the smaller version later on. But there was a Chinese company that just ripped them off and then became more successful and then bought them. I was like,
really?
Yeah, I was like, that's the most gangster shit I've ever heard in my entire life. That's like if you made your own YouTube and then you bought YouTube. No, it's not even that, because at least that's just a concept. That's not, I took your product. I don't know.
I wonder if it was a good deal. Like, I wonder if the Chinese just like did it better because they could do it more cost effectively. And then they're like, hey man, we made the thing popular. Now your company's worth more money, you know? And they, I don't know, maybe they cashed in.
Could be. I mean, those are one of those things where it's like for a year, it feels like that's the future. And then everyone's like, nope, never mind. We got a different thing. It's cool.
Yeah. And that's flash in the pan.
One of the, so kind of touching on the, explaining something for everybody. And this was a question actually I got from someone in my audience. Can you explain what cryptojacking is and Coinhive?
Yeah. I find this enormously entertaining. All right. So, you know how people don't like ads, right?
Sure.
Because you go to a website, and other than what you see visually being obnoxious, and it's like, why did I go to this place and it wanted to sell me headphones? And then I go to this completely different place and they want to sell me headphones as well. Like, how does the computer know this? Well, because they're tracking your behavior. And then the ads are often really bandwidth inefficient. They're just loading all sorts of crap up in your machine. On regular occasions, they've had compromises as well. I remember once I used to have ads on my blog a long time ago before I went to sponsorship model. And then I was getting messages from people going, I went to your blog on my iPhone and I got automatically redirected to the App Store and asked to buy Clash of Clans. So like, what? How does this happen? Well, because a lot of ads run by literally running JavaScript in your browser, and then hackers get in and they put their JavaScript in. Here we are. So anyway, people hate ads. But you're a content producer. You want to make stuff. You've got to monetize your work because we've got to eat, right? Mm-hmm. So there was this idea of having crypto miners running in your browser. So, we've all heard about Bitcoin, all sort of thing in crypto mining, where you have computers which will generate this digital currency, and they've got to work hard to do it. So the beauty of the idea of a crypto miner in the browser is let's turn everyone's computer into a crypto miner, and we will actually use that to monetize our audience as opposed to ads. So you go to, let's say it was for argument's sake, my website. You go to my website, you don't see an ad, but in the background, I'm consuming CPU cycles and mining. It was mostly Ethereum in the case of Coinhive, which we'll talk about now. So this was Coinhive's value proposition. We will create a service where you put a little bit of script on your site, and then it will run, and you will get a bit of Ethereum. Now, the problem was Ethereum. No, it was Monero. It was Monero coin. Okay. The problem is that some people would do that, and they would do it, and they would tell people, we're going to run a crypto miner. Is this cool? Yep, fine. A lot of people would do it and not tell people. But then what would happen even more than site owners like consciously putting this on their site themselves is you get hackers finding low-hanging fruit vulnerabilities, like weak passwords on admin systems or things like that. Or they would compromise third-party libraries, which then got brought into the site, and they would put their crypto miner on the site. So you're ending up with all of these websites that would get hacked, and they're running Coinhive because the crypto is largely anonymous as well. So it's literally like, hey, I've got control of this website, crypto miner on there. And then if there's like 1,000 people that come to the website, you've got 1,000 people mining crypto for you. So that was the business model of Coinhive, literally selling this service. And I believe they were raking in something like $250,000 a month. Like there was a lot of money coming in from this service. And then they got to the point where they said, look, it's just no longer economically viable because the work factor was so high to mine the coin that it just effectively eroded all the profits, and they shut down. And we were happy because it was gone. Like there are other things as well. For the most part, we were happy. And then you obviously saw that I managed to get that domain. And now I put my own stuff on websites that are trying to run crypto miners in your browser.
Wait, what do you mean? What do you put on other sites that...
Oh, look, I just put it. Look, I had suggestions of things I could have put on there that, let's just say, would have got people's attention. But what I decided to do instead is, if you go to one of these websites that's got the crypto miner on it, and there are tens, if not possibly even hundreds of thousands. I've got to see how much traffic I'm getting now, actually, of these different websites with crypto miners. You get this little window that pops up over everything else. And it's like, this website tried to run a crypto miner in your browser. You might want to get in touch with the site operator and suggest that they don't do that anymore. Wow. And what's been fascinating is there's all these websites that are now embedding my code in their site. But the cool bit is that the traffic is going way down. So obviously what's happening is there's all these websites that are now going, we probably shouldn't have done that. Or someone else has done this to us. We must have had a security vulnerability. Let's go and fix it and remove the code.
There you go. Hey, I hope you're still enjoying the podcast. Otherwise, you've stepped away and I'm talking to nobody. But hopefully you're still there, because I want to thank one of these sponsors of today's episode, Manscaped.com. You know, Manscaped, the premier brand for men's grooming, just launched their 4th generation electric trimmer, the Lawnmower 4.0. And as of right now, it is available in the United States and Canada. Seriously, just released moments ago, and we're one of the first to get our hands on it and share the news. You know, the craftsmanship and the details on the 4.0 are head turners. It gives you the ability to turn the 4000 Kelvin LED spotlight on and off when needed for a more precise shave, with the ability to customize your trim through additional guard length sizes 1 to 4. And did I mention wireless charging? The Lawnmower 4.0's new wireless charging system uses electromagnetic induction, which can actually help battery length last longer, and it's waterproof, so you can groom in the shower and not have to worry about making a mess on the bathroom floor. Best of all, you can get 20% off your Manscaped order plus free shipping when you visit manscaped.com and use code DeFranco. That's 20% off plus free shipping with code DeFranco20 at manscaped.com. So yeah, check it out, enjoy, and back to the podcast. I gotta ask, what browser do you use?
Most of the time, Chrome. So
really? Okay.
Yeah, and look, I use a bit of everything for different purposes. I use Brave a bit, so I will use Brave, particularly if I want to do anything on Tor, because it's super, super easy to jump into Tor from Brave. But Chrome is a very good browser, and Google does put a huge amount of thought into the way they build it, and things like the visual indicators that they give people around security posture. And I know a bunch of people working for Google on the Chrome team who are, I just know how much love and care they put into this browser. Put aside the whole Google tracking thing for a moment. There's other ways of dealing with that.
Do you? I know that you mentioned Brave for a second. I mean, do you? Is it almost like a prerequisite that if you're in this space that you're heavily involved in crypto, or no? Do you touch it? You run away from it?
I think it's just a question of how much you want to consciously focus on crypto as a very broad term. Now, you know, whether that's cryptocurrency or whether that's cryptography in terms of how we communicate over the internet, or whether it's the way we store things or sign things. We all touch it in one way or another, but there are people out there that carve out their lives, like literally writing cryptographic algorithms or how do we implement cryptographic protocols and cipher suites or things like that. And to be honest, like most of that goes over my head. I look at it and go, well, these guys are smart. You know, like,
well, because I was going to ask, I was going to ask specifically with, obviously I feel like a lot of my feed is like influencers pumping and dumping, but Ethereum's always been one that's, you know, stands out to me, just because whenever I talk to people that are far smarter than myself, they constantly talk about like the security, the implementation of it. And I mean, are you knowledgeable in any way regarding that, or how it could be used in the future?
Look, to a minor extent, the exposure that I have to crypto, most of my exposure to crypto is I have a donate page on Have I Been Pwned, and people will donate like a coffee, you know? Like I've literally said, okay, $3.50, I go get coffee. Now, the good thing about this is that they gave me a lot of coffee when Bitcoin was cheap.
So you're getting venties.
Particularly over the last year, I've been looking at my wallet and it's like, there's a decimal place in the wrong spot. Like how did this happen? And then I don't know what to do with it, because I'm scared if I sell it, it will go up. But like that is
everyone's held
the extent
hostage.
Of my
Everyone's held hostage by their hopes and dreams.
Oh no! I should be doing. I should be selling, like, I don't know, every few months, like sell off a quarter of it or something like that, and do like dollar cost average my way out of it. But look, I think as a concept, there's a beauty to a publicly accessible, immutable blockchain to have things on a ledger which cannot change and are independently verifiable and are not tied to sort of one regulatory body or anything like that. I see the beauty in it. I think, though, that it has not delivered on the promise that so many people have expected over the years. Not yet, anyway.
Well, I think that's because there are really people that have the vision of what it can be, and then there's probably 90% of people that are like, it's going to the moon, which is like, I get that everyone's trying to make a buck, but I especially, you know what I'm scared about is like all these people that are like buying and selling and not, and like, and they're using a Coinbase or places that like it's definitely being tracked, like and they're going legitimate, that are going to get fucked, especially with the IRS getting a huge amount of money to start, because there's going to be a lot of people that have never had money in their life cashing like getting $1 million deposit in their check or in their checking account. It's going to get nasty. It's going to be a bloodbath.
You know, I was thinking about this just today. It's like, what happens for people like if they bought some Bitcoin a few years ago, right, or whatever crypto, and now it's gone up so much. Like, surely this is an investment, and there are capital gains to be paid on this. The thing is that it is difficult, even for the accounting folks to wrap their heads around this. So the problem I have is I've got all these little donations here. They sit in Bitcoin.
Yeah. And
I've said publicly before I use KPMG to do a lot of my things, and KPMG is. They got a lot of people around the world, smart people. We literally don't know how to deal with this at the moment. So, okay, so I'm doing my taxes. What should I do about all these donations that have been made? They're in crypto. How much is it worth? I don't know. Ask me again in 5 minutes. It'll be different. Like, how do we account for this? Because it's income. And even now, like, I look at this wallet and go, well, do we pay tax on what it's worth now, or do we pay tax on what it was when we were given it, or do we just sit there like some sort of a non-fungible asset, and then when we sell it, then whatever we sell it for, like, these guys can't figure that out yet. It's just really, really weird and unclear.
Yeah, my mindset is I was like, I got mine in cold storage, and I'm going to return in 10 years, and it's either going to be worth nothing, and I'll be like, wow, that was a fucking just dumb decision, or I'll buy a yacht. One of the two.
Yeah, you got to make sure you can find it again as well, right? This is the other problem. So where did I put that? Where's that $10 million in my wallet now? You know, I put $50 in that 10 years ago.
What were
Where's
those
my $10 million?
What were those 20 words I was supposed to remember in case I lost this? What a.
But I mean, this is what makes it so fascinating, right? Because then you hear all these stories, you know, horror stories. And of course, it's always the horror stories that make the news. You know, the normal stories never make the news. And then people, you know, have had losses, and they're kind of like wanting to say, I wish there was someone that could help me get this back, like a regulator or something, but I really don't want to have regulation, which is sort of the whole value proposition of having it in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I see part of the dream, especially getting away from anything that's like established and seen as predatory. And I mean, especially when you talk about one of the project, I won't go into the specific coin. I just like the ability to move monetary value with low fees, because like when you really get into how much money is being made off of the transfer of money and how much you're needlessly charged, it's stupid. Like even just little things like when I wire money, I get $35. I'm like, why? I can literally do that in several apps for like 3 pennies.
And now try doing stuff across countries. So that I'll give you 2 stories. This is where I'd love to have crypto. If someone in the US sends me a check, like a physical piece of paper check, it takes up to 3 months to clear. So I got a bunch of services and things I run for different companies, and every time I get a check, I literally have to go, do I send it back? Because I'm going to be waiting up to 3 months, because it has to physically, and this is what's so weird, because even the mathematics don't make sense. Like I go to the bank and they're like, yeah, it'll take up to 3 months. I'm like, why? Well, we have to send it back to the originating company, and they're in America. It's like, well, I've been to America. I got on a plane. Next day, there's a day. Where does the rest of the time go? So there's that. And then the other one that was interesting the other day, and this is where I really want my crypto, is there's a company in Russia I do some work with, and it's a very, very well-known company, totally legit. The bank here in Australia said, we can no longer accept payments because they're Russian. I was like, yeah, and then they got into like export controls and things like that. And this is like, to be clear, like I'm not selling him nukes, right? Like there are IT services involved here. But they're like, our policy is we cannot allow payments from a Russian company for IT services. Sorry.
Wow.
Far out. Okay. They owe me some money. Like,
what am
do
I
we
supposed to do? Yeah.
Yeah. I will not get into the details of how we're having to work around that one, but that is something where I think there is a joy to crypto, because all that bullshit just disappears.
You always have to just like pay attention to the movies. Who's the bad guy in movies? I might not be able to cash checks from them. Where Russian bad guys are making their way back into movies, so maybe stay away for a little bit, and then it'll go to another place in 5 years.
Oh, that's crazy. It's crazy.
Troy, you're a significantly smarter man than me, especially in this world. What question should I be asking you? What do the people need to know?
Yeah, I think the interesting ones for me, the stuff I have fun talking about is just how weird some of the data breach stuff gets, and some of the things that are being breached. So I got a lot of IoT around me. I got things like these little sensors and stuff that do motion and light and all that kind of stuff. But because IoT is becoming so accessible, because chipsets have become so cheap and so small, they get into everything. And I'm finding it really fascinating now to see how much stuff never had internet in it before. We had these things around for ages, never had internet in it before. Now they put internet in it, and then you have data breaches the likes we've never seen before. My washing machine has got internet in it. Still not entirely sure why, but I connected it because I'm a geek, and I just want to see what happened. The thing that's getting really interesting now is even things like adult toys have got internet in them. And you sort of go, all right, number one, why? Number two, what happens when there's data breaches? But we're seeing this, like we're seeing data breaches and security vulnerabilities in things that you just never would have expected. And like this whole space is just getting super, super, super weird.
Well, wasn't there, I forget if it was a real story or if it wasn't attached at the point, but wasn't there like not a chastity belt? I don't know the actual.
Yeah, it was a chastity belt.
Okay, yeah, but something where it was like, you're locked up now. And I couldn't remember if the way the story was told was it was actually on the person, or luckily it wasn't. But that would be, yeah, that's a nightmare situation. That's the worst it could be in my mind. Like, yeah.
This relates to, I'm trying to remember the name of the company. I've found the news story here. But I've got a mate in the UK. He's a guy called Ken Munro, and he runs a penetration testing company. And Ken's done things like TED Talks. He's a noteworthy guy. He finds vulnerabilities in stuff like aeroplanes, like proper IoT stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's called Cellmate. Here you go. So there's a chastity belt called Cellmate. So he does this. He does this story where he's demonstrating just really egregiously bad vulnerabilities. And this is legit, definitely vulnerabilities in it. And Ken does it in his very polite British way, which makes it extra funny. So anyway, shortly after that, a really noteworthy InfoSec reporter, a guy called Lorenzo Franceschi Biccarai, someone I've spoken to many times before as well, super nice bloke. He's done this story, and here's his headline as he put it. And I was listening to him on a podcast recently. He said, "These are the best headlines ever made. Your cock is mine now. Hacker locks internet-connected chastity cage, demands ransom." Now, it says it all in the headline. But what it doesn't say is that the person who reported this effectively tricked Lorenzo into writing the story. So it was actually an Australian comedian. Now, I didn't know this until later on. And then I watched this YouTube video from the Aussie comedian, and he's like, let's see how messed up I can get with Vice. And, see if this Vice reporter will actually buy my story.
Yeah.
And in the story, he's like, yeah, the hacker's demanding Bitcoin, otherwise, you won't unlock the device. And then I had to get some bolt cutters and cut it off, and then I cut myself a little bit. And you can literally hear Lorenzo laughing in the in the video this comedian did. But I think what's actually like just getting half serious again from what's really interesting about it is that this is like this manifestation of Poe's law, where you get to the point where you just cannot tell the difference between parody and real life. Mm-hmm. And when I see stuff like this, everyone's like, yeah, that this could be feasible because this is the sort of stuff that actually happens. I can't even tell if it's a parody or not.
Nightmares. Yeah, well, wait, so when you do connect your your washer to the internet, what is it? Does it let you know that it's done? Is it just like that's all actually, it is, a notification?
Yeah, so there is actually a couple of value propositions. So one is that it can send a push notification, say, to your device. And that's kind of useful because I can't hear the washing machine from where I am. We've got a laundry, we close the door and it goes in there. So to know when it's done, and my partner and I, we both get notifications to our watches and things. So I was like, okay, it's done. You can do whatever you do with the washing once the washing machine's done. But the other thing is, and this is where it makes a little bit more sense, is when you think about a washing machine and you think about the interface, it's clunky. Like you might have a little LCD screen like this and some very clunky buttons. The ability to pull useful information from it is poor. So the Samsung washing machine I've got, in fact, just yesterday I got the notice that the washing has done. Also, the washing machine is due for a drum clean. So apparently you've got to clean the drum every now and then. So apparently somewhere in this Samsung Smart Things app, it will tell you when your drum needs a clean, and inevitably like the wear and tear on the washing machine or something like that. So there is actual useful information you can get from the device.
That seems better. I bought a June a June toaster oven a while ago, specifically because it was like you can preheat your oven from your phone and it has a camera inside. I was like, that's the future. This is the future I've been wanting.
The problem I have with that is it's a little bit like IoT controlled toasters and things like that. In my experience with toasters and ovens, you have to be very close to it to actually make it work, right? Like there is no point doing stuff remotely to it. You've actually got to be close to it. And then the interesting thing is, and this has literally just popped up on my device here, my washing machine needs an update. There is a new version of the device controller. Do I want to update? And I'm sitting here going, do I really want to update the firmware on my washing machine? Like,
this is the choice.
What new features will I get in this washing machine? Yeah, YOLO, just do it, download.
But that's also, I wonder with those things, if we will hit a point where we do pull back and we regress. Like you were talking about, I get notifications on my phone. I maybe an hour a day don't have my phone and my watch on Do Not Disturb. Like I cannot be bothered by the world because I want to be informed by these things, and then, or I think I do, and then immediately no, right? I have like news coming to my phone, then I have sports stuff because I'm like a sports nerd. I have certain people on Twitter, and I'm just like, why? I do wonder if when we talk about the next 20, 30 years, obviously we have like automation and stuff like that. I do wonder if we're going to see like anyone regress, or maybe not, because these kids are growing up with it. Like it's already it's a day one extension of who they are. Whereas, how old are you, Troy?
Mid-40s.
Mid-40s. Okay, so I mean, as far as people that I've had on the podcast, you can probably relate to this the most. I mean, when did you first start using the internet? How old were you?
So I was 18. The first time I saw the internet was in 95 when I started university, and I was 18. And I always sort of I have some memories of when I was 18. But the reason I remember that so clearly is it's like I got to adulthood without the internet. So all the stupid shit my kids are going to do, it's going to be on the internet. You know, I managed to make it to adulthood not only without internet but without camera phones as well, which I think has probably worked in my favor.
Oh yeah, there was I always forget his fucking name, but there was a comedian that was like, I love being 40 because everything I did in high school is a rumor. And I was like, yes, yes, 1,000% yes. I was like, my shit is close to that. My stuff existed on Angel Fire pages I made and MySpace accounts that I shut down. And there's just like 4 years where I can't track anything from me. So I like that. But also I operate from a standpoint of I have almost all my stuff except my show on auto delete after 6 months. Like I truly believe that everything I've done and ever will do will be cataloged by someone. Like that's just going to happen no matter what, because there are people that are like very diehard about the internet is forever. But I don't want to have to try and stand next to a framed photo of some shit I said 25 years ago. But let alone even a year ago at this point.
Well, I think that's very true. And I think another truism as it relates to the internet, particularly for those of us that are a bit more public about things, is that you're never going to be able to remove bad stuff about you from the internet. Mm-hmm. Like if there's something bad, it's always going to be there. The only thing you can do is drown it out with the good stuff. So the more good stuff that's out there, if and when something bad happens, it's going to be like hopefully hidden in there, unless it's like super, super bad, amongst all the other stuff. And if someone said that to me many, many years ago, and I really didn't think much about it until more recently when I had someone trying to dox me. So someone was like, I'm going to figure out like who this guy is. And in fact, they targeted a bunch of people that were making commentary on Gab, the right-wing US politics social media platform alternative. Targeted a bunch of us, and I was just one of many people. And what was really, really funny about it is this guy trying to dox me, and there's literally a web page trying to dox me. He's got all these photos of me, of my kids, of my partner, and it feels super, super weird.
Mm-hmm.
Every single photo I publish publicly, consciously. I put it out here. So I'm thinking, so I obviously just never engage with people like this, but I'm just sitting there laughing. It's like all you're doing is picking up stuff that because I've put so much shit out there, you can't find stuff that's actually not meant to be there. So all you've done is like made a collage, and it was actually really, really funny because he's like, yeah, and here's Troy's wife. And it's like, nah, that's my ex-wife, mate. It's like, this is a totally different thing. But I think that is a good strategy. Just put a lot of positive stuff out there.
Awesome. Troy, I know that like when I was looking through, you've partnered with a bunch of companies. What made you link up with? I think how we got connected initially was with Nord. What made you link up with them?
So Nord is I would argue probably the most well-known VPN product out there. So they do other things in the security space as well, but the VPN is what they're really known for. So I was kind of interested when I started working with them last year. It's like, where is the value proposition for VPN now? Because we're getting so much crypto by default on the internet. Like everyone's used to a little padlock, right?
Sure.
You go to your bank, you get a little padlock. You go to my blog, you get a little padlock. So we've got little padlocks everywhere. Why do we need encryption over encryption? And I ended up writing about it. I'm just going back to this post. It was September last year. And one of the really interesting things is that when you go to a website, usually your browser is going to try and make an insecure connection anyway. So it goes over HTTP, and then the website gets the request and goes, no, we want you to go securely. And it sends back a response, and then your browser makes a secure request. And when I pulled the stats when I wrote this blog post, it was something like 96% of websites, regardless of whether they redirect you later on, still make that initial insecure request. So that thing. The other thing that's really cool about using a product like NordVPN is that they can start to kill connections to things like trackers. So you can literally go, all right, I'm going to toggle the switch, and then the requests for trackers don't go. Coinhive, the request for Coinhive would have been killed as well, because they can just nail that entire DNS query and just not even return a response. So there's still all of these really neat places where it can kind of tighten up your own security posture and keep the nasties out, regardless of how much crypto you had in the first place.
And so, you think it's important to have, like, whether it be at home or like, I always make sure when I'm traveling that I have it on my phone, like, active, because I don't know. That's the main thing that I'm scared about, because I use a lot of public Wi-Fi and I probably shouldn't.
Well, I don't have a problem with public Wi-Fi if I've got confidence that my traffic's protected. And like, this is the entire value proposition, right? It's like you turn on your VPN, and then if the network is malicious, well, screw you guys. Like, everything is going out through an encrypted tunnel. And the reality of it is now is that we all seek out the Wi-Fi, right? Like, how many times have you been out there and you go into the cafe and you're like, have they got the little sign? Have they got the sign with the Wi-Fi password, So, we all seek that out, but we want to be able to do that. And it's not just like having your traffic monitored, it's having your traffic modified as well. So one of the things I found actually with that Coinhive situation we mentioned just before is that the hackers managed to compromise a whole bunch of routers made by a company called MikroTik. And they were literally intercepting the traffic going through the router and injecting cryptojacking into it. Now, if you have a secure connection and you're going through with a VPN, well, you can't do that because you're encrypting from this device all the way through into an exit node. So all the stuff immediately around you is encrypted.
Hey, it's just me interrupting myself, as I always do, to thank one of these sponsors of today's show, NordVPN.com/ACW. I've been a Nord customer for years, and if you still haven't checked them out by now, you're really missing out on the peace of mind one gets by securing your personal data and internet activity. With NordVPN, all of your internet data is protected behind a wall of next-generation encryption, and NordVPN servers are ultra fast, so there's no sacrificing speed for security. With Nord, you get both. And it's incredibly useful for our business since we often need to share large files securely, which, thanks to Nord, is no hassle thanks to hundreds of secure P2P servers. With Nord, you can protect your data and also get the most out of your streaming services that have different licensing agreements across different regions of the world. Just go to NordVPN.com/ACW and get a huge discount on a 2-year plan. And when you use my code ACW, you will get an additional month for free. And it's risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. So what are you waiting for? That is NordVPN.com/ACW, and be sure to use code ACW at checkout. So yeah, check that out, enjoy, and now back to the podcast. Were you involved in any way to all the information that came out about, oh my God, Parler?
Parler, yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I did a lot of commentary on Parler and Gab at the time, and I had never given any thought to Parler or Gab until, I guess, 9 months ago or something. You know, as Trump got deplatformed, and I found it fascinating on many levels. I mean, there's a whole thing about the politics and the implied racism and all. A lot of it's not implied, it's actual racism, but you know, all of that sort of thing there. But then there's this other bit, which is how does a platform where every major provider has booted them off their service actually run? Like if you had to stand up today and you didn't have cloud services from Amazon and you didn't have payments from Stripe and you didn't have all of these things, like how do you actually make it run? And I actually found that a very fascinating challenge, and I'm very surprised that Gab is actually still alive today.
Well, because I'm super unfamiliar because I only ever see like I haven't really looked into it, but I know that Parler is like come back, and then everyone started talking about Gab after Parler got knocked out. And did they essentially? Do you know what they? I mean, what is their site even on, or what is their app even on?
So for Parler seems like they've toned things down a lot. So I think Parler's getting back in the App Store. So they were really newsworthy because they got booted off the App Store, which really killed their footprint on devices. Yeah. It looks like the CEO they had has gone. They've toned down their views. They're much more around, look, we will actually moderate some content. And a lot of what I know from that is having watched the commentary from Gab, who are basically going, like, look at these guys, they're selling out, man. They're no longer the free speech platform. That's us. But Gab's interesting because they run all their own, I believe they run all their own infrastructure. And then the only cloud-dependent bit, and we'll see if it's still there, the only cloud-dependent bit or mainstream tech media bit that they've still got is Cloudflare. Cloudflare protecting that, which tears at me because I love Cloudflare, not so much Gab.
Huh. I mean, did Cloudflare at the time drop Parler as well?
I don't think Parler was behind Cloudflare, and Cloudflare's they're in an interesting situation. So Gab is still behind Cloudflare as of now. They're in an interesting situation because they're not a host; they're a reverse proxy. Mm-hmm. They sit in front of websites and they sit between people like you and I and the site, and they serve things from cache and they protect DDoS and all this sort of thing. And Matthew, the CEO, his view on all this, and like full disclosure, like I know all these folks pretty well also, and I really love what they do, but we don't necessarily have the same views on this. And his view was always, it is up to the hosting provider to pull the plug. So if someone doesn't like, let's say the Daily Stormer. So this was big news a few years ago, outright white supremacist site. Mm-hmm. Cloudflare was sitting in front of them. All these other platforms went, no, I'm not going to have anything to do with you. Matthew was very much like, look, this is up to the underlying host to pull the plug on them. We don't want to be the internet police. This is a legally running service. And I can understand where he's coming from in that if a site is running legally, how much subjectivity should the platform provider then have around whether they keep it running or not? I get that, but it feels icky when and eventually he did pull the pin on the Daily Stormer, and in fact he made the point. It's like we shouldn't be in a situation where he can get up one day, feel pissed off, and like literally just pull the plug and kill a website. I don't feel like we should be in this situation, but I don't know what the answer is either. Like I don't like this Gab rhetoric. I'd like to see it gone. I don't really want to see the likes of Cloudflare being judge, jury, and executioner either.
Do you have any semblance of like what is the most right answer, since it sounds like there's no 100% right answer?
I think the most right answer is as an industry, it would be nice to have a set of, call it community standards for want of a better term. Like can we collectively agree as an industry where the boundaries are? But the problem then is you go back to this discussion before about, okay, well, this spans the world, right? And you have all different people of different tolerances in different parts of the world, particularly when you get into things like, say, sexuality. Depending on where you are on the world, there is stuff that's outright illegal, which we would say you say a single bad thing about it and you're an asshole, and I think we're right in saying that. But then how do we create standards which then spans the world? I think in the case of Gab, I would like Matthew to go Daily Stormer on it. I'd like him to pull the plug. And again, this is my personal subjectivity, but when you read through the content and the incitement of hatred and intolerance, that's what just, really gets at me.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to something like a Donald Trump being deplatformed, Do you feel like that was the right move as well?
I kind of miss the guy, if I'm honest, because it was really entertaining.
No.
It was super entertaining. Like I'd just be there, like I'm having my coffee one morning and I'll go, how fucked up did Trump get last night? Well, let's just go through and have a look at what's been going on. So again, I feel a bit uneasy with the concept of individual tech platforms making value decisions on people's speech. However, we have to have some boundaries there as well. I mean, I've had death threats and things like this online, and I want those platforms to take action against those individuals. And I think that the challenge with Trump is that he was so influential over Twitter that there was a lot that he said which did cause damage. So as much as I miss the guy on Twitter, purely for my entertainment purposes, I think ultimately that was probably the right decision. And the fact that it was echoed independently by so many other mainstream tech platforms as well, I think then takes you beyond the subjectivity of just one organization. It wasn't like Jack Dorsey just got pissed with him. He's like, yeah, let's get rid of him. It was a collective decision by many different organizations.
Yeah, I think that's where for a lot of people, because right, you have the argument of, well, they are a private company that gets to control their platforms. But when you do have like the select few that can cover 95% of internet surface, like when does it cross a line into infringing on rights? And I definitely find myself now years later on a different place, because I personally do agree with like more moderation and regulation, which is something I never thought I would have said 6 years ago. Like I was very much of the mindset of like, anything fucking goes. This is the internet. It's supposed to be the Wild West. And then it got really fucked up. And now I'm like, oh, never mind.
Yeah. I guess our tolerances change a bit over time as well. But it's on the one hand a little bit worrying that you do have these tech behemoths, of which there are a small number. They're almost entirely US based as well. So, you know, there's going to come to a shock, as a shock for some people. But the US, I think, is a 4% or 6% of the world's population, like a tiny, tiny little slice of the world's population. And it tends to set the narrative by virtue of having so much influence. So the US view, which for the most part is pretty well aligned to us here in Australia anyway, but that view is what gets set by these platforms. And then these platforms run out there over the world, and you got, you know, like 3 billion people on Facebook. It's an American company with American politics and American views of what should be censored and what should not be censored. And it is interesting then when we see situations like, you know, there was, I'm trying to remember what the case was. It was like Russia recently. It's like, no, you simply cannot talk about this thing. Or I think they were banning like the gay symbols, you know, because Russia's got a very different view of sexuality. It's like, should a US company allow another country to do that? Like, I think most of us would not agree with that view. But they're their own state as well. So what do you do?
Yeah, I mean, as far as like America being a leader in that way, I do wonder how drastically that's going to change over the next decade. Just because, I don't know, I was when I was watching all these climate talks happening and all these countries that would have probably bent over way more backwards years ago to be more in line with like what the United States is doing. It just felt like, oh, I think we're seen, even though like you have Biden now, I think we are seen to a certain degree because of the past 16 years as kind of a wild card. Because, you know, because I think it's a good thing that, you know, we can have a different president every 4 years. But I think for other countries, they're just like, but you could just fucking change your entire game plan every 4. Why would we believe anything? Like you sign agreements and then you're like, never mind, fuck that agreement. Whereas you have China, which is, I think, as far as human rights and privacy and stuff like that, a monster and a very scary machine. But I feel very much like they're taking the baton and fucking running. Because at least with China, you know what you're getting. I think that the human rights abuses are scary as shit, and like they need to be held accountable. But I feel like they're running with it.
Well, they are consistent, and this is the thing. It's like many of the views might be recalcitrant to us, but they don't change much. You know, it is a consistent set of views. But look, I guess this is sort of the same challenge. We've got the same thing in Australia. I mean, we keep like literally booting out I was going to say presidents, I don't even know what we have here anymore, the prime ministers. We keep booting out the prime ministers we vote in. I think every prime minister that we've had in like the last dozen years has been booted out by their own party after we elected them. So, yeah, you got some weird stuff going on in politics, don't get me wrong, but you don't have a monopoly on that either. I realized the other day I'm up to I think I've got 140 IP addresses in the house now, and that doesn't include all the Zigbee stuff.
Jesus. See, I told myself I was going to go with something open source, and then my contractor got me working with this guy that has me on like some Control 4 system, and I was like, why did I do this? Why did I fucking do this? So I have to fucking call somebody every time I need one thing done so they can do the if this then that. Like, what did I do?
I just got stuck in this rabbit hole. You ever have one of these situations where you have this idea and it's something it's like a little grain and it's simple and it will be easy and it will be done by lunchtime, and then like a year later you're wondering what the hell you've done. And this is what happened with my garage door. So this is like COVID time as well. It's like, what projects can I do without leaving the house kind of thing. And like what I should do is make sure I can ask she whose name I can't speak, otherwise she starts listening, to open my garage door so that when I'm riding my bike home or something like that, I just pick my watch up and I go, open the door. And it'll be awesome. And I put out a tweet and it was like, hey, everyone, like, what's the product that you use to do this? Anyway, it took me about 4 months before I could open my door because you just start going down the rabbit hole. And the rabbit hole is like, well, there are some products, but they're hundreds of dollars and they work with Google Home and they work with Amazon Alexa. So, all right, well, but I got an iPhone. I want it to work with HomeKit. How do I do that? And soon enough, all the roads started to point to Home Assistant. So it's like, all right, go and get Home Assistant because it is free, it's open source. It's one of the 10 most active open source projects in the world as well. So it's super, super, super popular. And then you can start to integrate everything into that. And there's sort of there's a lot of detail to it, but it's also beautiful in its simplicity. You have all of these things that can push data in, and then you can cause other things to do stuff. So, one of the things that can push data in is there's a proximity sensor on the garage door. So that can tell Home Assistant, is the door shut or open? And then there's one of these little Shelly relays, that literally just closes a circuit. So then I can instruct Home Assistant to close the circuit, which then opens the door. And then you end up with 140 IP addresses in your house months later because you get carried away.
No, never. But Troy, thank you so much for making the time today. I appreciate you. Hopefully, I gotta be more secure with everything that I'm doing. I know that I said earlier on that I live like I'm gonna get my stuff hacked, but I still don't want it. Don't want it.
If you don't have it already, honestly, like one of the easiest things you can do is just get a password manager. Get a password manager.
No, I was actually that was one of my favorite things that I was glad that Nord actually added because I had what was it, 1Pass or whatever, and I was just like, I hate having all these different things. So anytime they're a sponsor of this podcast too, so it's like it feels like it's just an extended ad read. But anytime, honestly, like one thing can handle so much more, and they can make different products. Thank you. Anytime, awesome. Anytime these places can WeChatify their stuff, integrate more aspects of my life.
Yeah, very cool too.
Yeah. All right, Troy. The last question I'm gonna ask you. Not tech question. Just throw random curveball. In your eyes, what happens when you die?
In my eyes, I don't see anything more. I don't know much.
So you think it's all darkness? I've started asking people this on the way out just to make them uncomfortable.
Firstly, it's not my problem anymore.
I love that.
I recently redid my will, and one of the things I had to think about in my will is what about my digital assets? And this isn't just like my Facebook account and my email, but if I die, like what happens to my blog? What happens to Have I Been Pwned? So what I ended up doing is I've nominated a close friend of mine who works in this industry, who's in Australia, as like my technical beneficiary. So he would then be responsible for dealing with it. Now, that doesn't mean he just inherits it and he runs it or he gets it for free or anything like that. But yeah, he would be the guy to help. Let's say I go out there and I have a jet ski accident this afternoon and I'm dead. He would be the one to help my partner sort of recover all my digital assets and then, do the geeky stuff.
Okay. Yeah. But Troy, once again, thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah, my pleasure, Phil. It's been fun, mate. Thank you.